because you say that the idea of education is relative to the society that the student intends to enter.
So in our society, I believe that this idea of success or better performance is all towards the concept of living a stable life merely. And I would love to point out all the damage that the baby boomers have done to the economic status, but that's not what this paper is about, and that's just a funny topic. Anyways, but what it would be towards is simply living a happy life. I think that's what this society craves for, and we are starting to find it more hard to achieve. And that's why people are seeking these high standards of high performance in their academic lives, so that then people who have the power to hire them and give them the financial anchor to live a healthy life, they want those high performance. That's where I believe this society has defined its performance.
Okay. Now, so I guess this is where I wanted to go from there, since we've kind of established then that those are the three categories. I want to bring up something that to me is an apparent contradiction here. So, you say, so if we want to bring up Achilles,
Yes.
He's the greatest Greek warrior.
Yes.
He's been taught incredible, he has the high performance thing down
Yes.
in virtually every category. He said he was taught to be a speaker of words and a doer of deeds. If we want to talk about healthy quality of life, he was one of the nobility. So, I mean, and he had, oh, and by the way, he had like a 1-to-1, sorry, going back to performance, he had a personal tutor.
Yeah.
So best teacher-student ratio you could possibly imagine, and that's one of the things you bring up in your paper.
Well, it's also something I have in my own life.
Yeah. So, and then so in terms of healthy quality of life, again, you had that,
Yes.
friends, family, enough wealth certainly to live a comfortable life.
Yeah.
And then in terms of morality, if at least we're talking about what Hector defines as I mean, being brave, being valiant, and fighting for honor, I think Achilles has that in spades. So, by your definition, he should be the best educated person in the world. But you also then say, at some point, he gives into his passions.
Yes.
And I presume that's a bad thing.
I did realize that as I was writing my paper. I was detailing what the Iliad does in the sense that it is a great literary work that explains all of the deep, faceted natures of man's passions. But within this, I fall into the pitfall where this society, which we talk about often with education, through the definition that Hector gives, Achilles is a great man. But through our, I guess you would say, even advanced moral understanding, Achilles is fallen, and we can clearly see that. And as you said, through Hector's definition, he would be considered one of the best educated men of his time. But again, of this time shows that those morals might not have been as important back then as his honor or his glory in battle.
So then this is where I want to get to what I would consider the heart here.
Yes.
What is he, I suppose, lacking? If I could even go this far, you already kind of made this distinction. There's various levels of morality,
Yes.
I suppose. There's presumably better ones and worse ones. Which one is a better one, or which one is a higher morality?
As we live a Christian life, as C.S. Lewis, I believe, put it, you cannot, by saying that there is one morality better than another, you are ascribing that there is a supposed best morality, and that we all have a certain compass in our minds that strive towards that goal. And as living a Christian life, we actively search for that lifestyle. And as we read the Iliad, a pre-messianic story, you might call it, we can see that there are certain aspects that are lacking in it. You see this in lots of literature that was composed or thought of before the coming of Christ. And so as we look at this, I do believe that's important to look at it through that lens to recognize the differences in the culture itself that would show different priorities in their lifestyle that we should not necessarily replicate in our own because we have a new understanding.
So, but then again, I ask the question. So, what is the new understanding then? What is something that Achilles is lacking? Can we pinpoint some examples here?
Yeah. The first thing that I say about Achilles is that he gives into his passion of pride. This pride being that he feels as though he deserves so much because he knows that he's going to die young and become this glorious Greek hero. He believes that he deserves this woman that is stolen from him. And that's where his retribution and wrath begins. He goes against his own men in this war and says, I'm going to withhold your greatest resource, me, and I'm going to cause you to suffer. And I say through his pride, he causes the suffering of both the Greeks and the Trojans.
Mm-hmm.
This moral compass itself is what's lacking.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe that that's because of a lack of education, but a lack of moral education on the grounds that we have in our modern age. I don't think that we can see this in Agamemnon too, the king of the Achaeans, where he doesn't have that moral anchoring that we would want to see in men in our day. And so I don't believe that's a flaw in their education, but a difference in cultural priorities.
Well, right, but we're saying though it's a real flaw.
Yes.
Like whether it's acceptable to the Greeks or not, if we want to say if we're looking at it's still a flaw that causes death,
Yes.
destruction.
Yes.
I think. Does he deserve it?
Does
He
he
seems
deserve
so.
what?
Well, I mean, doesn't he deserve what he's been given? Which is, I mean, that's one of the things that's one of the complaints is that I was given this by the king himself. How can he take this back? I think.
In the sense that he deserves it for his reward from Agamemnon, in that sense, merely of the agreement that they have with each other. I believe that he did deserve it, but in terms of his actual person, and in terms of what I believe, morality-wise, of what rewards a person might deserve, I don't think he deserves anything.
Okay. Okay. Why?
Because through my moral understanding that I have, he suffers from a lack of all moral empathy whatsoever. And through that lens, I tend to dissociate this character with any hero, but simply a powerful man with lots of passion. Passion isn't sin.
He lacks all moral empathy. What do you mean by that?
He fails to recognize that his power is meant to be used towards saving the Greeks, towards helping other men, realizing that he is not the only man and that his power is not just for himself, but for the entire nation of the Greeks. This empathy is realizing that there are other men in the world besides yourself. And I do believe that he suffers from that, and I can see that through his actions of selfishness, which would be leaving these men to die. He watches them die at the hands of the Trojans many times from his ship. And it's only because of his best friend that he goes and fights. So.
Well, and not just that, the death of his best friend.
Well, this question is sort of a propedeutic to some of the questions that we're going to want to answer toward the end, but what is suffering for in the mind of Achilles? And how is his education prepared or not prepared him for that fact of
This suffering that we see throughout the story of the Iliad, we do get to see a character transformation within Achilles. In the beginning, it is showcased his pride and his wrath, you might say. While by the end, we do see him empathizing? That's a word, yeah. Empathizing with Priam about the death of Hector and the death of Patroclus. And through that, we can see that the suffering that Achilles has gone through has been able to transform him as well. And I don't believe that Achilles realizes this, but that suffering that he goes through not only encourages him to finally perform his duty as a Greek hero and help to save his nation,
Mhm.
but also allows him to become a better person and realize that this anger and revenge that he wants is not at all effective.
Hmm.
And I believe that he does realize that.
So he learns, in other words.
Yes, he does learn by the end.
I just have to jump there then. How is it that we can instill an education? Because, and for those who haven't read the Iliad, he does get to a point where, well, his pride